So here we are back at the Virginia-Tennessee state line. I finally made it back here. And let's see how bad this is. Obviously has a miss. You can smell the fluid. And I don't know how well that's showing up on camera, but you can see the white smoke. Which is, of course, a really bad sign. Step on the gas a little bit, leave something against it, and you can see it much more prominently now. So yeah, we have a blown head gasket. Thanks to my own stupidity, and I will tell you step by step what I did wrong to cause this to happen. Okay, I am in the big van at a nice city park. So I have a couple hours to kill waiting for my buddy to get off work so I can meet him this afternoon. Go over to the minivan. I've got something I'm going to try to save it. That's a completely different video. But let's talk about what happened, why it happened, and more importantly, the stupid thing that I did that set this whole thing into motion with the gold minivan and turning a really simple problem into a much more complicated problem. Here's the short version. I started noticing I was losing a little water in the minivan and I couldn't figure out where it was going to. So I just kept a little extra water and antifreeze. And I hadn't been on any long trips with the minivan. I had a feeling it might be the water pump, but I never could find the leak. I couldn't see where it was going, and I think it's because the design of the engine, when the water slowly dripped, and if you don't know a lot about water pumps, there's a little rubber diaphragm generally on the bottom. It'll start to give way, and you will end up with a slow trickle leak that turns into a bigger and bigger and bigger leak. It's time to replace your water pump. I couldn't find this one. I think the design of this with the water pump kind of on the top of the engine, the belt running all the way around, when it was barely leaking, it just dispersed the water because everything was dry. There was never any leak hitting the ground. There's never any water on the frame, side of the engine, anywhere I could find. Just why I couldn't quite figure out where this was going. Wasn't overheating, wasn't an issue. So one day I take it out. I'm not going far. I'm still in my county. And I notice the temperature gauge start going up. So I pull over, and now I can see plainly where the water is going because whatever little leak I had has now turned into a big leak, and I can actually see it running out of the water pump before it disperses everywhere. So now I know what the problem is. Water pump. Easy to get to, no big deal. I am a couple miles from home. When you have a problem like this, you have an overheating problem, the first thing you should do is pull the hell over and shut your vehicle off. And then get whatever help you need. Dummy me, because I've been on such a winning streak. If you notice, I mentioned the other video, when I got stranded, it was 27 years, more than half of my life. I was a young man the last time I was stranded. With everywhere I've traveled, having jobs, I worked on the road, all kinds of vehicles. I'd never been broken down and stranded since 1993. So because I have had such incredible luck, I have had a ton of vehicles over the years and never had transmission problems and never, did all the maintenance I was supposed to do and then some. Been incredibly lucky. So because of that, of course, I decide to push it. Because it's hot, it's in the 90s, I'm only a mile and a half from home or so. Let's just book it through town, get back to my house where I can park it under a tree, and the next morning I'll take it somewhere and get the water pump changed before this trip I have to do with it to North Carolina. So I run it home, and it was fine. It cooled down. I got up the next morning. It was, half a gallon low or something again. And the thing holds about 4.5 gallons of fluid, so that's not a big deal. You know, put my half-gallon, gallon, whatever in that is lost. Book it through town before it can heat up. Take it to the first garage. They can't get to me. Book it back through town. Still didn't heat up too much. Got it to the second garage where they changed the water pump for me. Got me in quick. That was nice of them. What they did not do was any kind of pressure test because I didn't ask them to. Sure, it was the water pump. That was it. So I get it back. It's not leaking. I check the level a little bit later. Not everything seems to be fine. And I'm making 1 or 2 mile trips for the next couple of days until the time comes for me to take this big trip. But what I did notice that evening or the next evening, and somebody got in the vehicle with me and said, "Hey, you've got a miss." I said, "Yeah, I know. Can't quite figure that out." And then it threw an engine code for the first time. My vehicle didn't have any engine codes before this. So I checked the engine code. It's a problem with cylinder 2. I'm thinking to myself, 2 unrelated issues. Spark plug, plug wire, something simple. So I don't really want to delve into it. This is a V6 engine turned sideways. 3 cylinders I can't get to, 3 cylinders I can. The one that's throwing the error is one I can get to. So I run out, grab a set of plug wires, and actually before I took off on this trip, being sure that was going to solve my problem, 80% wise, jerk the plug wires loose, run a new one over, started it back up, and it actually ran worse, and then it threw a different error for a different cylinder. So now it's running really rough. Shut it back off, take the new plug wire off, put the old one back on. It's running now again with the miss it originally had. I'm thinking, I hate to do this, but I'm in a hurry. I need to take this vehicle. I've been unbelievably lucky for decades now. I'll risk it. I'll take it with the miss. It's running fine. I'm not noticing any power loss at all, even going up hills and mountains. It's running fine on the 5 out of 6 cylinders, so I'll just deal with it, get this trip out of the way, then I'll take it somewhere and find out what's wrong. Thinking the 2 issues were not related was my mistake. I take off on this trip, I make it about 27 miles before I start overheating the first time, let it cool down, do what I can, doctor it up, trying to get from place to place, one friend's to another. Made it about 30 miles a second time before it overheated, let it cool down, blah, 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 same story. That was where you saw me when I filmed it in the rest area. Buddy came to get me, we threw all the stuff in his vehicle. Next day I take it to a garage, you know, and drop it off, and it is what it is. Roundabout, here's what's happened. I have, more than likely, a blown head gasket because they did pressure test it, and as I just showed in the video, I do have that nice puff of white exhaust. I still don't have, amazingly, any power loss whatsoever in this vehicle. It starts up fine, it has plenty of power, which I guess is a good thing. Where I missed what was going on and really messed up goes back to the day I originally let it overheat and tried to make it that last 1.5 miles to my house with it. More than likely, at that point is when I damaged my engine. And sadly, I even have a towing plan. So I could have just had someone tow it that day onto the garage instead of just deciding I didn't want to deal with the hassle. I can get it to the house, and the next morning I can get it from my house to the garage. So when it overheated then, that, before I even changed the water pump, is probably when the head gasket cracked. Where the fluid went after that was going into that number 2 cylinder. And had I taken the time to actually pull the spark plug out, more than likely there would have been water and antifreeze dripping off of it, which would have been a sure sign that I had a serious problem. But I didn't do that. I swapped that plug wire, and screw it, went on. I should have taken that extra step and pulled that plug and looked at it. I didn't do that. So again, my fault. My fault for running it hotter than it should have been and letting this happen to begin with. And yes, I'm an idiot. And the reason I'm sharing this is so if you are ever out in this situation, you do not make the mistake I made and turn a potentially small problem into a potentially large problem. Feel free in the comments to let me know what an idiot you think I am. I have a thick skin, I can take it. Now, a head gasket, if you have to have this done, and I don't have the patience and the days to do this, I just don't anymore, is a very labor-intensive job because basically everything has to come off the motor to get down to it, get the head off. The gaskets themselves, a gasket set, the gasket's this big, gasket set, depending on the vehicle, is between about $50 and $200. You will get quoted probably at least $1,500 for a head gasket job because the rest of it is going to be labor. And that then is if you don't have a warped head from heat, if you haven't cracked the head, or if you haven't cracked the block. In which case now you get up into even more money and can get up into $3,000 or $4,000. So with that said, I am going to take and try one thing to possibly save this minivan that I'm having the issue with from the crusher, because I really hate to do that to it. What I'm going to try may work, it may not work. I'll film that. There'll be another video on it coming up shortly, and I'll let you know the fate of the gold minivan. Appreciate you watching. Hope you learned something. Feel free to give me any kind of feedback down in the comments. Ask any questions if I maybe wasn't clear on something and how things went down. We'll see you soon.